Hi, I'm Dr. Gail Randall. I am here to do my 6 o'clock Instagram Live. So I'm so happy to see you, happy you're charming in here. I am an integrative physician. I'm board certified in integrative medicine. I'm certified in functional medicine. I'm also certified in gastroenterology and a lot of other stuff. I have like 20 disciplines that I practice and draw from in my clinic, but what I'm really interested in mostly is healing chronic disease and healing the planet, because they go hand in hand. So hi everybody, thanks for joining in. Hi Patty. Hi Suzanne. So today, last week, we talked a lot about the planet, and that sort of indicated what we should eat, or maybe more what we should not eat. What is best for the planet is also turns out to be what is best for us. How about that? So, except for maybe fish, which we have to take a pause from the fish, even though they are probably good for us. The fish are just not in a sustainable position right now. We have the least number of fish we've ever had, and the oceans are just too stressed out. So the only way to really make a difference is vote with our dollars and not buy fish. So that the way that they're doing the open water fishing, which is just atrocious, it's a holocaust of our oceans. If we don't stop it, we will have no fish by the year 2048. And that is not a good situation, because we will have no oxygen then, and the ocean being the largest CO2 storage on the planet, it would have no place to go. So we're not going to eat fish right now. I mean, if you eat a fish, treat it like a sacred offering and have it maybe for Christmas or something like that. But give the ocean a rest. She will come back, and that's been shown. When that kind of fishing is banned or not done, that the ocean comes back. And the ocean does come back, and the planet comes back if we give her a chance. But today we're going to talk about food sensibly. Let's talk about food sensibly, okay? So the proper diet is really tough right now, because we've really gotten so far away from how we evolved as a human race. You know, I've had anthropologists in my office discussing this situation with me, and I tell them my position, and they say, well, you know, you're right, Dr. Randall, because our ancestors, our predecessors, really only ate what they foraged. And that's where our genes come from, our genetic material that we're walking around in. And so it kind of gives you an idea of what the body expects. And it's a biomimicry situation again. If we can give the body what it expects, you'll get the most quotient of health out of your life. So what did those predecessors, what did those ancestors eat? They foraged, and they ate roots, they ate berries, they ate from the ground. They ate things, the potato-like things and carrot-like things and berries from the trees, and they very rarely ate meat, actually. And when they did, it wasn't the kind of industrial meat that we eat, that is full of chemicals and glycosates and hormones and everything else, because we grow the grain to feed the cattle, or the livestock, if you will, and tilling the land to grow that grain to feed the animals, which we then torture and eat and fill them full of chemicals, and we eat them, so the chemicals go in us. And that's why it causes diabetes, and that's why it causes heart disease, and that's why it causes cancer. But if you eat meats that are grown from a regeneratively farmed source, they don't have those chemicals in there. And yes, it's expensive, but again, treat it like a sacred thing and have it sometimes. So that's my suggestion for the meat and the fish, and we discussed that last time in depth, but more the reasons why. So what else about feed? What should we eat? You know, and there's just like so clouded, like I said, because of all the food fads, the seductive nature of fast foods, and the diet of the month club, if you will, and these weight loss diets. They're so seductive, and they get people to think, oh, I'm going to lose all this weight in a very short period of time. And so they get on all these different diets and they forget what they're supposed to eat, you know. So let's try to clarify some of that. Sensible is the operative word here. Most people don't care about sensible. They want fast, they want good, and they want instant. But it's really, food should be considered a ceremony. We should sit with our families like we used to and have meals. And that way we're not only honoring our bodies and honoring the planet, we're honoring our community. And that's been shown to increase the quality of our lives in our lifetime, the span of our lifetime. You know, we get into these things like all carbs are bad. And in fact, that's not true. Remember when all fats were bad? It's just not everything all is bad. Everything in moderation, including moderation. Have you heard that before? So they have these, you know, this is evidence, they have these stores where all they sell is low-carb food. But it's really odd because it's all pre-prepared and plastic wrapped, and, you know, not all carbs are bad. Vegetables are carbs. They're just complex carbs. And that's the kind of things that we should be eating, is vegetables, but fresh vegetables, not things in plastic. And, you know, they have millions of different nutrients, antioxidants, and things like that, which I'm going to go into in more detail. But the thing about carbs, how they got a bad rap, is because refined carbs are bad. So I say we should eat a whole foods, mostly plants, low carb, meaning low refined carb, low fat, and low protein diet. But what does that mean? That means a lot of beans, a lot of legumes, a lot of vegetables, and you can cook it any way that you want. You can have any ethnic combination of food that you eat now, and it's delicious. Check out my Instagram. I give lots of recipes, and there's ways of eating food now that is different than it ever was and satisfying, even for the people that like meat. So, the keto diet. What about the keto diet? Everybody wants to know about the keto diet. Well, if you really want to do the keto diet, you can even do it in a plant-based way. But in fact, recent studies have shown that if you eat fat in excess, any fat, even good fats, it causes insulin resistance. So that's not a great thing, and people that have done keto diets long-term have been shown to have an increase in their cholesterol levels, which of course leads to heart disease. They've shown to have an increase in osteoporosis. And these are not things that we want to have, increased blood pressure. So as I thought for a long time, you know, the keto diet, because your brain can run on fat, does not mean that we should leave it in that emergency situation for long periods of time. It just happens to be that the bodies are really smart, and the brain wants to go on existing, and it will run on fat for a period of time if that's what it has to do. But it's not desired for a long period of time because it causes systemic damage and inflammation. And as I said, the new test shows insulin resistance, which is what? Pre-diabetes. So that's not a good situation. So our bodies are the temples of our souls, allowing us this physical experience we call life. And we need to keep that mindset when we choose our food. And when we choose the food for ourselves and for our families, we need to satisfy all of our basic needs, which of course are food, air, water, shelter, and sleep. But we need also to think about our food, like where did it come from? Is it really good for me? What are my genes asking for? And which are ancient. And so we need to take that all into consideration. So how do we nourish ourselves in this day when most of our food is tainted and has chemicals in it and so forth? Well, you know, back in the day when I used to recommend organic food for people, people would say, oh, I can't afford that, Dr. Randall. I'd say, well, you can't afford not to. because the way that it is, if you don't eat organically, you are toxifying yourself, you're toxifying your children, and you're not encouraging the food environment to provide you with what you need. And now, go to Costco, go to Walmart. We have tons of organic food now, and we can do the same thing with our food now if we vote with our dollar. So let's insist on organic food, insist on organic vegetables, and if absolutely need be, and you can't afford regeneratively farmed meat, and you're going to have meat once in a while, make it grass-fed, organic, pasture-raised. That means the animals are roaming about freely, and they're eating grass, which is the best thing for them. Unfortunately, they still allow a certain amount of chemicals, which is not going to be in the regeneratively farmed food, and don't get grass finished, because that means it was in a feedlot for a while, and then they feed it grass, and maybe it didn't even get to be in a pasture. They just fed it grass. So that's not what we want. We want pasture-raised, free-range, grass-fed. So if you look at the standard American diet, SAD diet, as we call it also, it's meat at every meal, potatoes, which are okay in moderation, pasta, gluten-free pasta is better and actually very available. They make pasta out of lentils and chickpeas and all kinds of good stuff now. You don't have to take gluten in your pasta. Gluten is a problem. When it taken in excess, the body does not like a lot of gluten. Well, first of all, gluten generally comes in industrially raised breads and pastas, and so they automatically have glyphosates. Gluten itself, especially with glyphosates, causes a leaky gut situation. And most of you have heard about leaky gut. It causes your cells, which are usually like this, like they're picket fence stuck together. They have little things called tight junctions, like the little marks on my hand, and they loosen up because there's swelling. And so your cells, which are normally like this, they don't want to let in toxins into your system. So that's a good situation. So the food will go through the brush border, go through your cells, be processed, and then release into your bloodstream. Well, what happens when you get leaky gut is the food still goes through the brush border, but the cells have moved apart, so it goes straight through into your bloodstream, and your body goes, oh my God, there's a dangerous stranger in the house, and it makes an antibody to it. And that's how we get allergies. That's how we start reacting to foods, and then it'll cross-react with antigens in your own body, and that's where you get arthritis, and down the line, if done long enough and in the quantities, autoimmune disease. So we don't want any of that. So stay away from gluten, especially non-organic gluten. And there are plenty of amazing gluten-free breads made out of flax and sorghum and millet and things like that right now. So get those kind of breads, and they're delicious, and they have a lot more weight to them, and they're kind of crispy when you make them, and make your avocado toast and put hummus on it or whatever, however you like to eat it. There are great acceptable breads now. I used to say no bread, whether it's grown on the moon or blessed by the Pope, and now there are. So I live in an era where I can change my mind when something better comes along. So there are better breads that are good, and pastas. So just don't eat gluten, especially not organic, because it has the glyphosates, and that's what causes big health problems. So also sodas. I hope none of you do sodas. I mean, actually, there are your holdouts out there, but soda is full of sugar, full of high fructose corn syrup. If it's a regular soda, if it's diet, it has aspartame, which is worse. It still causes an insulin spike, and it turns into formaldehyde in your body. And of course, that is not a good situation, because that causes all kinds of problems in your body, and it makes you acidic. So we don't want to be acidic, and we don't want to be flooded with glucose and have those insulin spikes and raise our hemoglobin A1C and perhaps our CRP, which is a C-reactive protein. So be cognizant of what you're ingesting. Water is wonderful. Your body wants water. It's what it wants. It wants half your weight in ounces of water a day. So say, you weigh 150 pounds, that's half of that is 75, and, that's a lot of water, but, just go for it as much as you can, and then you'll be the healthiest that you could possibly be. So, as I said, the best diet, I think, is plant-based. Modest amount of protein if you really need to. The number one choice for that would be regeneratively farmed protein. And I did a podcast. I have a podcast now. It's called Soul Stories. We've done 20 podcasts, which is pretty amazing. And I had the Blue Nest Beef boys on, and they're just amazing. And they're called Nest, Blue Nest, because they're named Nest because they restored the plains birds, the birds of the plains, by farming cattle in the regenerative form. So they're really amazing, and there's others. Here you can Google it, but we have Primal Pastures, we have Kiss the Ground, which has a great documentary, so you should try to watch that on Netflix. It tells you a lot about regenerative farming, and if you listen to my podcast, it tells you a lot about regenerative farming. They don't use any chemicals. They just move the animals. Again, it's a biomimicry situation. They have them first on, say, hectare of land number 1, and then after a short period of time, they don't let them eat the grass all the way down, and that's the secret. Then they move them to hectare number 2, and then they keep moving them, and they don't get back to the first hectare of land for maybe a year. And when you study how the buffalo grazed, the buffalo came in once a year, they ate, and then the predators came along, and they moved. They start grazing over here, and then they graze over there, and then they kept moving throughout the plains. And in that way, the grasses came back robust. Each year, the buffalo came each year and were plentiful. And we were in balance with nature then. So we need to get back in balance with nature, and we need to have a little bit of our input on it, and we need to do biomimicry, like I said. And so, I'll have a whole session with a patient, and I'll explain this, what I just explained to you, and then I'll tell them, your body is designed to make protein out of amino acids. So you don't have to eat meat to make meat. There's another Netflix called Game Changers, which shows these Olympian athletes that actually changed into veganism, and they were more powerful and stronger and faster and felt much better on a vegan diet than they did on an animal-based diet. So you don't have to eat meat to make meat. Meet my friend, the silverback gorilla. He eats no meat, and he has more muscle than Arnold Schwarzenegger, or 2 or 3 or 4 or 5 Arnold Schwarzeneggers. He eats berries and bamboo shoots and various roots and things like that, maybe the occasional bug. But, he basically is an herbivore. If you look at the largest, most muscled animals on the planet, they are herbivores. So we can do that. And how do we do that? I mean, I can tell that to a patient, and then they'll say, okay, but how do I get my protein? Even vegans are brainwashed into they have to have a high level of protein intake to make muscle. In fact, you only need to have the right complement of amino acids. There's amino acids in many vegetables. There's tons of amino acids in legumes. So once again, you don't have to eat meat to make meat. You can make it out of vegetables, you can make it out of beans, you can make it out of lentils, you can make it out of chickpeas. And there's protein in spinach. So we'll get this message eventually. And this particular patient said, okay, Dr. Randall, I'm going to do everything you say. And then he started asking me, right away, people start thinking, well, what's my meat replacement? What about the Beyond Meat burgers? And, the Prager's burgers or the other ones. The problem with those are they're not organic. And I've been writing them and talking to them and pleading with them. I mean, the Beyond Meat guys must have made a ton of money by now. They have their burgers in fast food restaurants and everything else. But now they've cut me off Instagram, so they don't follow me anymore because I always ask them the same question. But it's made out of good stuff. It's made out of spinach and soy, I think, and no, it's legumes and spinach. Excuse me, and that is probably the perfect combination. Problem is, again, it's not. It has glyphosates in it. Even if it's non-GMO, it has glyphosates in it. So GMO just means genetically modified. So it's not genetically modified, which is a good thing, but it doesn't say it's without chemicals. So it's still got Monsanto on it. It's still dangerous, and it's got 280 milligrams of sodium in each patty, which is not good for someone with high blood pressure, and it's not good on a regular basis. You can make your own veggie burger pretty easy. Look it up. You can take some lentils and, you use the juice from chickpeas as a egg replacement, and it helps stick it together, and you put some spinach in there, and you put it in your skillet with a little bit of olive oil or some Miyoko butter, and it cooks up really nicely. Put it on your gluten-free burger bun and enjoy. And it doesn't have any chemicals in it. So I always teach my patients to eat non-processed food because it's processed meat that is most highly associated with chronic disease. It's been proven to be associated with high levels of heart disease, coronary artery disease, and also with diabetes. It turns out that diabetes, the 435 million people in the United States that have diabetes, is from meat. Of course, the high fructose corn syrup and sugars and stuff don't help, but it's from the inflammatory process of industrial and processed meats. So let's get off of those for our own health. It's also good for the planet. It's said that if we took all the fields that we now grow crops on to feed the cattle that we then torture and full of chemicals and big pharma, antibiotics and whatnot, if we changed it immediately to beans, we could probably solve the world's hunger situation, and we'd stop putting carbon in the air, because it's the largest source of release of CO2 is tilling the soil for those crops. So this is a really bad situation, and that amount of CO2 that comes from those crops far outweighs every combustion engine on the planet added together. Not that those don't need to be addressed, because they do, but it just tells you, what a situation that we have. So we want to really encourage the organic growth of our livestock and the humane treatment of our livestock, because that's not how it exists right now. And it's the largest source of adding to the carbon debt, which is causing global warming, which is what is killing the ocean. So it's all connected. So also, on the good side, studies have shown that a vegan diet, a plant-based diet, can click off your genes for prostate cancer, colon cancer, breast cancer, and heart disease within 3 months. I mean, that's huge. If you read Dean Ornish is an amazing guy. He's a hero of mine. He's written books on reversing heart disease, cardiac disease, and he's shown that if you put people on a plant-based diet, they can have triple vessel coronary artery disease. They not even potential candidates for a bypass. Within 3 months, their chest pain will go away. Within a longer period of time, they don't even need a transplant anymore. So it's incredibly medicinal. I've cured many people from cancer by putting them on a plant-based diet, many people from diabetes and heart disease and cholesterol problems. It's just the way to go. It's what our genetic shells are asking from us. But we're not listening, a lot of us, because it's just easier to go drive through and get a hamburger. It's easy, and it kind of is satisfying, but in the long run, I mean, we've seen all these documentaries, Super Size Me and all that stuff, and see what happens to those people is not a healthy thing. So let's go healthy, and let's also go for a healthy planet and eat mostly a plant-based diet. So we talked about fish. It's also, so the conclusion of what to eat right now is take a pause from fish, or make that a super sometimes thing. Eat only, when you talk about meat that's regenerative or at least 100% organic pasture raised, but mainly eat plant-based. Plant-based, low carb, low fat, organic. That's the best food you could eat for the planet, the best food you can eat for your body. So now about how to eat. Let's talk about how to eat. So that's part of the eating sensibly. So most people are concerned about their weight, or they're concerned about their metabolic rate, or they're concerned about, not feeling well when they eat. Then they feel bloated, they feel weird. So the best way to eat, I think, is intermittent fasting. If you're overweight, it'll help you lose weight. If you want to just increase your metabolism and feel more energetic, it's the way to go. So I do it, you don't eat from dinner time until maybe 11 o'clock or 12 o'clock the next day. So it's 12 or 14 hours of not eating. But it's really more like timed eating. So maybe it should be called timed eating instead of intermittent fasting. But there's several forms of intermittent fasting. So try them out and see which one's best for you. There's also a genetic test you can get to see what's the best way for you. But for me, it's the intermittent fasting. And that's like I said, not eating or eating for 8 hours. And then not eating the rest of the time. There's the 16-8 method. Now this is all from Healthline, and also called the Lee Gaines protocol. And that involves, like I said, the 8 hours a day of timed eating. There's the Eat, Stop, Eat protocol, which is fasting for 24 hours twice a week. So it's a possibility, see if that works for you. The other one is the 5-2 diet, where you eat only 500 to 600 calories a day. Now, I don't know about that because they've studied this, but when I find people that do that, sometimes they're undercaloried, and it depends on the patient, but if their body is in a stress state, which get a lot of that lately because of COVID and the mental health issues and whatnot, it won't let go of a pound because it's scared, and then when it's not getting enough calories, then it really puts its foot down and it won't lose weight. So that might not be good right now for our post-COVID anxiety issues. But in general, intermittent fasting has been shown to, especially the timed eating, to be effective for weight loss, weight control, lowering blood sugar, increasing insulin sensitivity, increasing your metabolic function, and even remediating cognitive decline. So that's a huge thing. Make appointments with yourself for your meal times and keep them. That's just like your exercise times. The other problem with eating is emotional eating, and we've seen a lot of that during COVID, and I know it's difficult, but my hacks or my suggestions for that, if you feel like reaching for that cookie or that extra piece of bread or serving or whatever, I'd say don't keep that stuff around, but I don't buy cookies because I'll eat them. So I don't bring that kind of food into the house, the refined carbohydrates. The thing about refined carbohydrates is you eat them, I mean, everything turns into sugar eventually, right? But when you eat those refined carbohydrates, they're already broken down so far, but you have amylase in your saliva. And by the time the amylase in your saliva mixes with it, you chew it, it gets down into your stomach and goes to your small bowel, it's sugar. It's sugar. And then it throws the balance of your gut off. It promotes dysbiosis and bad bacteria and things like that, attracts bad bugs to come in because they're always around. And it get back to the leaky gut thing again, which we already discussed what can happen. So refined carbs are not a great choice. You know, again, it's a sometimes food. You know, if it's your birthday, you want to have a little piece of cake, go for it. You know, it's not what you do 10% of the time, it's what you do 90% of the time. It makes you what you are. That's Randall's rule, but I think a lot of other people have versions of that. So back to emotional eating. So when you get that urge to eat something that you're really not supposed to, and you know you're not supposed to, ask yourself, am I eating this because I'm upset, or what is eating me? So ask yourself what is eating you, and maybe address that problem. But change your subject. So you're really wanting that cookie or whatever it is, maybe call your friend, go for a walk, play with the dog, listen to some music, dance around the house. Just change the subject, change the channel, I call it. Change the channel and get your mind on something else. That often works. If you eat, I call it eat, C-H-E-A-T, count to your age before you do it. Now, if you're young, that won't last very long. People my age, it usually works. So anyway, and we talked about water. Drink half your weight in water, of ounces in water a day. And it kind of fills up your stomach. I love water, and I'm a water guzzler. A lot of people say, I don't like water. I said, how can you not like water? You are water. That's just a bad habit. And you really need to get in the habit of drinking a lot of water, because it plumps up your cells, it boosts detoxification. It's just essential. You know, we are mostly water, by the way. And don't feel defeated if you go ahead and eat that cookie. You know, it's not the end of the world. Say, okay, I fell off the cart, so now I'm going to get right back on and just keep going, or you put a skip in your record. Just, you fell off, everybody falls down sometime, and you just get up and keep going. Do whatever you need to do to distract yourself from eating what you should not eat. So to continue with the carb story, are they the demons? Well, they are really pretty bad, because when we evolved, getting back to our genetic makeup and what it asks us for, there was probably this much sugar, like in the form of honey or a flour or whatnot, in a 100-mile radius. So maybe the guy that got that sugar got a survival advantage for just a minute, got more energy, was able to burst up that tree, or, you know, get the girl or whatever. You know, maybe that was why we evolved this way, to really crave sugar. There's a part in your brain called your nucleus accumbens, and it's your addiction center. And they've done these studies, like with rats and things, or even people, where they're addicted, and that part lights up like a light bulb. And when they give these rats sugar, or a choice between an addictive substance and sugar, they go for the sugar every time. And even when they give them an electric shock, they stand on the little place where to get their sugar, push the little pedal down, and they get an electric shock that's near lethal, they still go for the sugar. It shows you how addictive sugar is. So I say we're all born addicted to sugar, but if you stay away from that sugar for about a month, that increased activity, if you will, or the lighting up of your nucleus accumbens goes down. It fades out like a dimmer switch. So my suggestion is you just have to do that. You just have to deny yourself that sugar, and you won't crave it any longer. Because people will ask me, well, how do I deal with these sugar cravings? Well, there's a lot of other things you can do. You know, you can take a cold shower and go for a run. You can try taking various supplements, but honestly, you just have to cold turkey it, and then it'll go away. Listen, nothing lasts very long, and a month is not very long, and you can do it. So all of those kinds of foods that are baked goods, cookies, biscuits, any cereals, they're just gonna light up your nucleus accumbens. So try to steer clear of those completely. If you want to have like a cereal type thing, they do have granolas, which are sugar-free, and they just have coconut flakes added, and they're quite good. You might look into that. Oatmeal is fine. It does not have gluten in it, and you can add fruit to it. And fruit is fine. The sugar in fruit is fine. The only time the sugar in fruit is not fine is there are certain people that have fructose intolerances, and of course it would not be fine for them, but that's not most people. And then there are people that have what's called autobrewery syndrome, which is also very rare, but they can't have any carbs, like even potatoes or whatnot, because the bacteria in their gut, although this can be treated, turn it into alcohol. I had one patient that even his family was beginning to wonder whether he was telling the truth, because he was drunk all the time, and he got in trouble at work and whatnot. And when he came into my office and he says, "Doc, I just really don't know what's wrong with me," and I said, "I know what's wrong with you." He was so relieved, and he was even more relieved when we treated his dysbiosis and got rid of those bugs and put him on a special diet, so that it didn't happen to him anymore. He's a whole new man. So, so do take into consideration how glycemic your food is. You know, glycemia means sugar in the blood, and there are glycemic indices for each food. And a really fluffy kind of sourdough bread is going to be highly glycemic. A really heavy bread made out of flax and sorghum and brown rice is going to be a low glycemic bread. And that's what you want. There are certain fruits that are more high glycemic, that's bananas and pineapple, but everything else is pretty good, except for dried fruit, which does turn into sugar, and I always warn my patients about that. So we alluded to dysbiosis. We talked about dysbiosis. We talked about fruits. Okay, let's get a little specific. So, there's a big thing about legumes now. There's a guy named Dr. Gundry, sorry to name names, but I mean, I think he's a great doctor, and I really like a lot of the things he says. The only thing I don't like what he says is he says people shouldn't eat legumes, and that's just simply not true. If you soak your legumes, get organic legumes, soak them overnight, you can take the majority of the lectins right off, and you're fine. And because it's a great food source and shouldn't be vilified. And I never saw anybody come in with legume disease. Never. Now, if people's guts are out of balance in the first place, they do need to avoid legumes for a little while because they're more fibrous. And then once we balance out their gut, they can handle the legumes again. So, probably the most beneficial, you need to know, and you can judge this by the color of the food. So anthocyanidins, which is a word you probably won't remember, just remember it's a fabulous phytonutrient that's in purple and red foods. So things like eggplant, grapes, raspberries, strawberries, even turmeric green tea contain anthocyanidins, and then those are anti-cancer and those are antioxidants. Other foods that you want to target as being quite healthy are from the allium family, such as garlic and onions and leeks and shallots and cruciferous vegetables, which have glucosinates in them. They are super anti-cancer, and they also are very good for healing because they're sulfurous. That's why sometimes you pass gas that's a little sulfurous when you eat those foods, but they're very, very good for your healing, and they're very, very good for preventing or treating cancer, and also other antioxidant, chronic diseases and whatnot, reducing inflammation. Olive oil is really good. It turns into polyphenols with the bacteria in your gut and helps reduce heart disease. So we know about olive oil, most people know. Like I said, fruits are good for you. They have tons of vitamin C. They have lots of antioxidants, folic acid, things that we need. And then the anthocyanidins in the blueberries, grapes, apples, beans, cranberries, peaches, plums, raspberries, rhubarb, strawberries. So look at the color. They're purple or they're red. Those things are quite good for you. They have potent antioxidants. And they also squelch out free radicals, which are cancer producers, or they cause damage in your DNA. So beneficial carbs are essential to our diets. So there's a difference between beneficial carbs, as I said, and refined carbs. All right, so that's the carbohydrate situation. So let's talk about fat a little bit. How are we doing on our time? Whoops, I better talk fast. Okay, like carbs, fats get a bad rap. Either they get a bad rap or else keto, which all you should eat is fat. Don't be confused by it. I like to call it fats, the good, the bad, and the ugly. So let's get real about it, you know? Okay, the good are polyunsaturated omegas and monosaturated. So polyunsaturated fat is mostly in nuts and seeds and fish and oils and oysters, and omegas are mostly from fish, but not only from fish. So omegas also come from algae oil. So you don't have to consume fish to consume omegas, and also from a plant called pigweed. And some omegas come from nuts and seeds. That's mostly the EPA. It's known that the omega-3 is an essential fat because our bodies don't make it. And primarily we get too much omega-6, again, because the animals are fed the grains, and the omega-6 comes from the grains, and then we eat the animals, and we get a disproportion of omega-6 to omega-3, which that's partly what accounts for hardening of the arteries. If you remember, your great-grandma had something called Crisco, or when the fat is too much omega-6 or too hydrogenated, it solidifies. And when the ratio of omega-3 to omega-6 is off, that's not healthy for your cholesterol or your cardiac situation. So we got to make sure, because if you're eating industrial raised meats, but if you're not, then you're probably not having a problem. The omega-6 to omega-3 ratio should be 4:1. Unfortunately, with the standard American diet, the ratio is more like 10:1, and that's what leads to cardiac disease. In general, it's best to focus on a good balance of omega-3. All the omegas should be balanced. There's omega-3, there's omega-6, there's omega-9, and there's even omega-7, which comes from seeds. So if you don't eat any seeds, you're not in balance that way, because you're not getting any omega-7. And omega-6 we generally get way too much of. It's the 3 that we need to focus on, and then the 9s, which come in nuts like walnuts and things like that. And if you don't have a balanced omega, it can raise your blood pressure, cause clots or strokes or heart disease. The worst fat is refined vegetable oil, but I'll get to that. Monounsaturated fats are the only fat that does not become an inflammatory molecule in your body. And that comes from, so the monounsaturated fats are generally considered the good fats. So the olive oil, the avocado oil, or avocados, or coconut oil, or palm oil. But palm oil is kind of not cool because they're really having to harvest too much of the Amazon rainforest, and it's killing off all the orangutans. So, hi guys. And so that's not cool. We don't, the planet belongs to all the animals and plants and things, and we need to be fair, and we need to honor all God's creations. And we're basically wiping out not only the rainforest, but the home for the orangutans, and they're getting extinct. So don't eat palm oil. Vote with your. It's not that it's not good for you. It's not good for the planet, and it's really overall not good. Okay, the bad fats are the saturated and the trans fats. So, like I said, the Crisco is a hydrogenated, man-made fat by heating up fat to over 700 degrees and adding hydrogens to it. And it used to be very commonplace for trans fats to cook your French fries in McDonald's or any fast food restaurant, but now they've actually banned it because it is so unhealthy, which is good. But unfortunately, they still sneak it in as a preservative in many baked goods. So read your baked goods, and then they fool you, because if you add up all the omegas in the baked goods, there'll be some left over, like it doesn't add up to what they say. Well, the leftover part is trans fats. So that's very unhealthy for you. Your body doesn't know what to do with them. They stick on your arteries and things like that. So read your ingredients, read your labels. Okay, so now the ugly. The good, the bad, and the ugly. So this is the ugly. The ugly fats are omega-6 polyunsaturated fat from refined vegetable oils. It turned out that I think around the end of the war or something like that, they changed over to primarily linoleic acid or refined vegetable oil, and they noted a marked increase in heart disease and cognitive decline. So don't use refined vegetable oils. They're very bad for you. They can cause all kinds of cardiac disease, and particularly cognitive disease, which is not what we want. All right. And then a lot of people call sugar public enemy number one. I'm thinking public enemy number one is really meat, processed meat right now, because it causes most disease, but sugar is right up there, and we already discussed sugar, but it not only causes weight gain and leaky gut and inflammation, but it tears down the immune system by working through the gut and causing more dysbiosis and imbalance and bloating, if you've noticed any of that, and it leads to heart disease, cognitive decline, arthritis, autoimmune disease, and an elevated hemoglobin A1C and elevated CRP. So when those things start happening, your metabolism has gone off the reservation, and you need to get it back. You need to cut those refined carbs out of your diet, eat complex carbs, and get away from those refined carbs, because they are almost as bad as processed meat. Okay, so my future vision for a diet is a plant-based, vegan, and regenerative agriculture. That would be the healthiest for us as people and the healthiest for our planet. It go hand in hand. That's my recommendation and my vision, and I'm going to keep talking about it until we get it. Okay. Now, any questions? I'm ready for questions now. Hi, Valerie. I know there's a delay on Instagram, so I won't hang up just yet. I know somebody wanted to come on with me earlier, but I wanted to get all my points across first. I'm sorry I didn't call on you. If you're still there, we could give it a try. How is popcorn? Well, popcorn's like popcorn with nothing on it is just a carb. It's a carb. If it's organic, see the problem with corn is more than 90% of corn is not organic. So it's full of herbicides, pesticides, and fungicides. But if you can find an organic one, and I find organic corn on the cob lately, so I imagine you can find organic popcorn. But if you're having any problems like with your weight, I had a patient, it was so interesting because she was so rigid on her diet and she loved popcorn. So I'd say, well, what are you eating now? And she'd say, well, I'm eating vegetables and I'm eating root vegetables and I'm eating lettuces and greens and popcorn. Is that part of your meal? She goes, yeah, satisfying. And so we measured her over time. And she's not heavy. She always runs her weight between 100 and 104. Now, when she's 104, she thinks that's just heavy, crazy, and honestly, she looks fine, but I get what she's saying. But then I started noticing when she was 104, her C-reactive protein would start going up. And then she'd tell me, okay, she's eating popcorn. I said, try stopping the popcorn. Because she's the one that likes to have her blood indices all perfect. When she'd stop the popcorn for the 6 to 8 weeks that we would wait in between her blood tests, her weight would go down, and so would her CRP. Now that's interesting. So I don't know what kind of popcorn she was eating, but I think that it's a possibility that if it's not organic, and if you put a lot of junk on it, that it can negatively affect your metabolism. Sorry, I know everybody loves their popcorn. You can make things that are crunchy, that are good, that satisfy that same popcorn crunchy stuff. I like to make things out of my Air One bread that's made with flax and brown rice and sorghum. I mean, it gets so crunchy. I like dipping it into hummus and things like that, and that's very satisfying. Anything else? All right. I love you guys, and I urge you to think about your planet when you're eating. Eat mostly plant-based. Eat organic for sure. And if you're going to eat meat, have it be regeneratively farmed or at least 100% organic, pasture raised. We'll see you next week. Love you. DM me if you have other questions. I love questions, okay? Bye-bye.